So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Stock up and save big on shoes, tops, dresses, accessories, and more must-haves for summer. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Hi, Diva. It's Rachel.
And Jordan. Yeah, hi. Quick question.
Why are you not spending your Venmo balance?
Yeah, we're concerned.
You can, buy stuff with it.
Ugh, you love buying stuff.
And earn cash back on eligible purchases.
You love purchasing eligible things.
So the money your friend sent you yesterday, that's today's ramen or rideshare or eye patches.
The skincare kind, not the pyro kind.
Spend with Venmo, then you can earn cash back with Venmo Stash. Venmo Stash bundle terms and exclusions apply. Max $100 cash back per month. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms. ID verification required to use a Venmo balance.
You're listening to Unbound presents Until They Wake. 7 episodes, 6 lives, 1 impossible convergence. Beth Curry's been chasing these stories for a while now, and she's finally ready to share what she found. It's not what you'd expect. Nothing about this is. Pull up a chair. This one's different.
Hey, this is Beth Curry, and you're listening to the final episode of Until They Wake. Over the past 6 days, I've told you 6 stories. There was James Cooper, Ruth Mitchell, Maria Gonzalez, Danny Walsh, Bill Harrison, and Mira Sharma. These 6 people faced death and walked away, and they built lives afterward. And they ended up in local hospitals years later. And today I'm going to tell you what happened when their paths converged. And then I'm going to tell you why and what it all means, and what any of this has to do with a night I spent in a car with my sister, experiencing something I still can't explain. But first, the convergence. Ruth Mitchell follows the sound of a baby crying. It's strange, she thinks. Strange to hear that sound this deep in the building, this far from the maternity ward, this far from anywhere that makes sense, but she's certain she hears it, distant, echoing, impossibly familiar. The corridor opens into a larger space, cold and clinical, fluorescent lights humming overhead. And she's not alone. A man stands near the far wall, younger than her, hair still wet, water dripping from his shoulders onto the floor. He looks the way people look when they're somewhere they don't recognize and can't explain how they got there. He's staring at something on the far wall that Ruth can't see yet. A woman comes in from a different corridor, breathing hard, one hand pressed to her left side. Professional clothes, the expression of someone who was just running and doesn't quite know why. Then an older man in work boots, concrete dust still on his jeans, moving carefully, the way a man moves when something in his back has never fully healed. A younger man in a button-down shirt, quiet in the way of someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible. And finally, a woman staring at her phone with the particular frustration of someone who cannot get a signal and cannot understand why. 6 people, 6 strangers, standing in a cold room beneath a hospital, looking at each other with the same expression. The expression that says, I don't know where I am, and I don't know who you are, but I think you might be the only person who can help me make sense of this. One of them starts to ask a question and doesn't finish it. Ruth turns to see what they're all looking at. A wall of storage drawers. Small metal doors, each one with a label holder, the kind of drawers that only exist in one type of room. She steps closer, not because she decides to, but because something pulls her there. The way a name pulls you across a crowded room when you hear it called. She finds her drawer. Mitchell, Ruth and Infant, 1987. Her name, her year. The year of Interstate 84, a November rain, and a baby who kicked hard against her ribs at the wrong moment. She survived that crash. She had Claire. She raised her daughter. She lived 28 more years. Didn't she? The woman with the phone finds hers next. Sharma, Mira, 2008. She says it out loud, that she survived the crash, that they told her she'd survived, that 14 people made it out of Flight 2317, and she was one of them. The man with the wet hair touches his drawer like he's not sure it's real. Cooper, James, 1995. He says he saved Tommy, that he dove in. Tommy grew up and got married and brought his daughters to the community center to learn to swim. The older man goes pale when he reads his. Walsh, Daniel, 1976. He says he recovered, that he married Linda. They had Katie. Katie went to Pratt and designs buildings now. The woman who came in breathing hard finds hers and takes a step back. Gonzalez, Maria, 2001. She says no. She went to law school. She passed the bar. She helps people. The quiet man in his button down doesn't want to look at his. You can see it. The way he approaches the wall slowly, the way he already knows what it's going to say. Harrison, William, 1992. He sits down on the floor. Says his mother found him. She called 911. They pumped his stomach and he woke up. And he promised her. Silence. The hum of refrigeration units. The buzz of fluorescent lights. What follows is a conversation that doesn't have clean logic because there is no clean logic available to them. Mira says the hospital is in Springfield outside Philadelphia. Maria says no, it's Springfield General in Brooklyn. Or it was. She thought she was still in Brooklyn. Danny says this hospital's in Jersey. He helped build it in 1976. Ruth says Springfield General's in Portland. Her mother had a stroke there. 4 different cities, 1 building. Someone points out the dates on the drawers span 32 years, 76 to 2008. Someone else points out that they all arrived here in 2015. All of them. James was visiting Tommy's daughter. Ruth was visiting her mother. Maria had just finished her workshop. Bill had been sitting in the waiting room hoping his friend would make it through the night. Danny had been walking off a bad back in a hotel connected to the building where he'd almost died 39 years before. Mira had just spoken for 45 minutes about surviving the unsurvivable. All of them in 2015, all of them in the same room, all of them staring at drawers with their names on them from the years they thought they survived. Maria is the only one who says it out loud. They didn't survive. None of them survived. And the room gets quiet. Ruth says she held Claire, that she felt her daughter's heartbeat against her chest, that you don't invent something that specific and that physical and that real. James says he watched Tommy grow up, that he stood in the bleachers and ate sandwiches Sarah packed and cried at a wedding in 2009 in a way that surprised him. Danny says Katie went to college, that she called every Sunday like he used to call his mom. That she's real. She has to be real. None of them sound certain anymore. Bill is the one who names the room. The morgue, he says quietly. They're in a morgue, looking at their own names on their own drawers. Nobody argues with him. The lights flicker, the refrigeration units hum, the cold settles deeper. Ruth looks at these 5 people she has never met: a swim instructor, a construction worker, a paralegal, an accountant, a woman who survived a plane crash, and understands that they are connected by something that doesn't have a name. That whatever this room is, whatever this moment is, they were all pulled here by the same impossible gravity. She says she doesn't want to forget. She doesn't want to lose Claire. Not the memory of her, or the weight of her, the smell of her hair, or the way she looked at graduation. Bill stands up. He moves to stand with the rest of them. Says maybe that this is all that they get. These memories, these lives that they thought they'd lived. And maybe that counts for something. The lights flicker again. Something shifts in the room. Reality bending at the edges in a way that none of them have language for, in the way that none of us have language for, in the moments just before everything changes. Mira says she thinks it's happening again, that they're going back. Maria asks if they'll remember meeting each other, remember this room, remember standing together in this cold under a hospital that exists in 4 cities at once. Nobody knows. The 6 of them stand together as time does something it isn't supposed to do. It fractures. It folds back on itself. It returns each of them to the moment they've been living inside all along. In 1976, a platform gives way. In 1987, a car crashes on a rainy highway. In 1992, pills are counted into a palm on a bathroom floor. In 1995, a swimmer goes under. In 2001, a knife finds its mark on a Brooklyn sidewalk. In 2008, a plane falls out of the sky. Until they wake. These stories, if you haven't figured this out by now, and some of you probably did by episode 2, I wrote them. All of them. They're fiction. This was something I did a couple of years ago when I was processing death. James, Ruth, Maria, Danny, Bill, Mira, none of them were real people. I made them up. Created their lives, their deaths, their impossible survivals. But before you feel deceived or frustrated with me, I need you to understand why I wrote them. Because this wasn't just a creative writing exercise. This is me trying to make sense of something that happened to me. something I still can't fully explain, and something that's made me question everything I think I know about reality and consciousness and the nature of existence itself. So here's what actually happened, okay? I'm not just writing this. This is a true story. I was driving with my sister one night, and we were leaving a parking lot. We were turning right on a 2-lane road, and it was dark. It was late. It was summer. We were on the beach strip. Lots of young and carefree teens and young adults out late, just like we were. We were talking probably about something completely mundane. I don't know. I checked for traffic. The road was clear. I started my turn. And then a car appeared, not approaching from a distance, appeared like it materialized from like out of nowhere because it was moving so damn fast. It was so fast. It was passing another car illegally, using my lane to do it, the exact lane I was turning into at the exact moment I was turning into it. There was no time to react. There was no time to brake or swerve. The physics of it didn't allow for any outcome except collision, right? But we didn't collide. The car went through us or around us, or we phased through it. I don't have the right words for what happened, because what happened doesn't fit into the vocabulary that we have for describing reality, right? It felt supersonic. It felt cosmic. It felt like the car went right through us. Like for a split second, we existed in different layers of reality. It was like the universe glitched or bent or accommodated this impossibility. And then it was over. The car was past us. We were fine, completely fine. No impact, no sound, no nothing. I looked at my sister. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. And she looked at me the same way, eyes wide, face pale. We both knew that like something impossible had just happened. We talked about it immediately. We tried to make sense of it. We were both completely freaked out. Now, this was over 30 years ago, well over 30 years ago. I've never forgotten it, ever. And here's the part that I can't explain that bothers me, I think, almost as much as the incident itself. My sister doesn't remember it anymore at all. I've brought it up over the years. Remember that night in the car when that impossible thing happened? And at first she'd remember and we'd talk about it and relive the strangeness of it all, right? But somewhere along the way, that memory disappeared for her. So now when I bring it up, she looks at me like I'm talking about something that never happened, or that it wasn't her in the car with me. She has no recollection of the event, no memory of our conversations about it, nothing. It's like it's been erased from her timeline completely. But I remember it vividly. I can still see the car. I can still feel that impossible moment, like when the laws of physics seem to kind of bend around us. I remember her face in the moment, the shock, the fear, that mutual understanding that we just experienced something we couldn't possibly explain to anybody. And ever since I realized that she no longer remembers it, I've had this thought that I can't shake. What if we did get hit? What if in one timeline or one reality, we died in that collision? Because we should have. What if she's living in a timeline where it never happened and I'm living in a timeline where it did, and somehow we're still together, but experiencing different versions of the past, right? I don't know if we're in different timelines, even though we're in the same one right now. I don't know if that's even possible. But the fact that she remembered it and now doesn't, and the fact that a shared experience we both acknowledged has disappeared from her memory but remains vivid in mine, that's kind of maybe almost more unsettling than the original event to me. I don't know, because it suggests something about the nature of memory or consciousness or reality itself that I don't have like a framework for understanding, right? So I want to talk about quantum immortality, and I'm going to go deeper into this than I originally planned, because I think we need to kind of sit with how weird this concept is, if you can wrap your head around it, and I have a hard time doing that. There's an interpretation of quantum mechanics called the many worlds interpretation, and it was developed by a physicist named Hugh Everett in 1957. And it's one of several competing explanations for how quantum mechanics actually works. So the basic idea, at the quantum level, particles exist in something called superposition. They're in multiple states at once until they're observed or measured. The classic example is Schrodinger's cat, right? Which is simultaneously alive and dead until you open the box. Most interpretations of quantum mechanics say that when you observe the cat, the superposition collapses and the cat becomes definitively either alive or dead. One outcome happens and the other does not. But Everett said, what if both outcomes happen? Like, what if the universe splits every time a quantum event could go multiple ways? In one branch, the cat's alive, and in another, the cat's dead, and both realities exist just separately from each other. I don't know. Like, this isn't science fiction. This is a legitimate interpretation of quantum mechanics that's taken seriously by real physicists. It's not proven. Like, we have no way to test it because by definition, we can't observe the other branches, but mathematically, it's completely sound, which is wild. And here's where it gets really weird, too. The math doesn't care about scale, right? We tend to think of quantum effects as only mattering at tiny scales, like subatomic particles doing weird things that don't affect our everyday experience. But if many worlds is true at the quantum level, there's no reason it would stop being true at larger scales, which means, I think, every decision point, every random event, every moment things could go one way or another, the universe splits. Both outcomes happen. You just can't perceive the branches where the other outcomes occurred. You're starting to see where this is going? So, let's apply this to near-death experiences. Imagine you're in a car accident. At the moment of impact, there are countless quantum events happening in your body, in the car, in the environment around you. In some branches of reality, those events combine in a way that kills you instantly. In other branches, you survive with serious injuries. And in other branches, you walk away with barely a scratch, right? So from an external objective perspective, all of these outcomes happen. The universe splits, and in some you're dead, and in others you're alive. But the crucial part, you can only experience the branches where you survive. Because dead people don't have experiences. By definition, if you die in a particular branch, your consciousness in that branch ends, right? No more observations, no more experiences, no more you in any meaningful sense. Does this make sense? I know I'm crazy. So from your subjective perspective, from the only perspective you can have, you always survive. You always find yourself in the branch where, against whatever odds, you made it through. This is quantum immortality, and the implication is genuinely unsettling. I don't know. It means that from your perspective, you might be functionally immortal. Not because your body can't die, it absolutely can, and it does, in countless branches. But because you could only ever experience the branches where you're still alive to have experiences. Okay, I know. Crazy. So I'm going to take this even further, though, because there's a version of this idea that gets really friggin' mind-bending. What if consciousness doesn't actually need a functioning brain to continue generating experience? Stay with me here, okay? We assume that consciousness is produced by the brain, right? That's the materialist view. Mind emerges from matter, specifically from the electrochemical processes happening in our neurons. But what if that's not quite right? What if consciousness is more fundamental than that? And what if the brain doesn't produce consciousness, but rather acts as a kind of receiver or a filter for consciousness that exists more broadly, right? This isn't a new idea. Philosophers have been debating it for centuries, and there are some quantum physicists like Roger Penrose or Stuart Hameroff, others, whatever. They've proposed theories about consciousness being a quantum phenomenon that doesn't strictly require classical brain activity. I'm not saying these theories are proven. They're not. They're highly speculative, but I just want to follow the logic for a minute, if you can stay with me. I don't know. I'm just running my mouth here. I may not be making any sense. If consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, and if many worlds is true, then maybe consciousness keeps experiencing reality even after the brain dies. It just shifts to the branches where the experiences can continue. And this is where it gets really strange too. What if those branches become increasingly unlikely? What if your continued survival requires more and more improbable circumstances? So from the outside, from other people's perspectives, you died, they mourned you, they moved on, your body is in the ground or cremated or donated to science or whatever. But from your perspective, you survived through some incredibly unlikely sequence of events. Maybe the paramedics arrived in time, or the bullet missed your heart by a millimeter, or whatever. Maybe you walked away from a plane crash that killed everyone else. And life continues, but it feels different, like a little off, maybe a little more dreamlike, because you're not in the main timeline anymore. If there even is such a thing. You're in one of the increasingly improbable branches where your consciousness could continue existing. Yeah. Let me talk about what this world would actually feel like, because this is where the psychology comes in. If you were living in an increasingly improbable branch of reality, how would you know? What would be the subjective markers of that experience? You'd probably feel disconnected, disassociated, like you're watching your life happen instead of fully living it. I've been there. Like there's this thin film between you and your experiences. You might notice inconsistencies or small things that don't quite add up, right? Like memories that don't match other people's memories, or places that feel slightly wrong, maybe conversations you're certain you had that other people don't remember. You might experience a lot of déjà vu. That feeling, if I've lived this moment before, might actually be you experiencing similar moments across multiple branches with some kind of bleed through between them. You might feel like reality is somehow less solid than it used to be, like the rules are more flexible, or like sometimes things happen that shouldn't be possible. And here's the thing, all of these experiences are also symptoms of psychological trauma and dissociation and derealization and various mental health conditions. So how do you know which it is? How do you know if you're experiencing quantum branch hopping or if you're just experiencing the normal psychological aftermath of trauma? I guess the short answer is you can't know, right? There's no test for it. There's no way to definitively distinguish between a genuine quantum phenomenon and a psychological response that feels identical to what quantum phenomena would feel like. And I think that's kind of unsettling. I don't know. I want to talk about memory for a minute too, because I think this is crucial to understanding what might be happening. So we think of memory as a recording device, right? Like our brains are cameras that capture these experiences and store them for later playback. But that's not how memory actually works. Memory is reconstructive. So every time you remember something, you're not playing back a recording, you're rebuilding the memory from fragments. And in that rebuilding process, you can alter the memory. You might add details that weren't there or remove details that were. You might blend memories together. Sometimes you can create entirely false memories that feel completely real. This has been demonstrated in countless psychological studies, right? You can implant false memories in people fairly easily. You can convince them that they've experienced things that never happened. And once those false memories are established, they're indistinguishable from real memories. They feel just as vivid and just as certain. So I think the uncomfortable question with regards to that is, how do you know which your memories are even real? Most of us never seriously question this. We just trust our memories. We build our entire sense of identity on them. I am who I am because of the things I've experienced. But what if those experiences never happened? Or here's an even more uncomfortable question. What does really happened even mean? Like if you have a memory of an experience, and if that memory shapes who you are and how you move through the world, if it affects your decisions and your relationships and understanding of yourself, does it matter whether the experience actually occurred in some objective sense? Like from inside your own consciousness and from the only perspective you have access to, the memory is real because it's part of your experiential reality, right? So if you died in a car accident in 1987, but your consciousness continued generating experience in a branch where you survived, and in that branch you had a daughter and you raised her and you built a life, are those experiences less real because they didn't happen in the branch where you died? I don't think there's a clean answer to that. So I'm going to tell you about something called the simulation hypothesis, okay? Because I think it connects to all of this in an interesting way. The basic idea popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom is this: it is possible to create realistic simulations of conscious beings. And if advanced civilizations tend to create such simulations, then statistically speaking, we're probably living in a simulation right now. Conspiracy theories aside, and, all the Matrix people and people say, well, we're living in a simulation. Who knows, right? So the logic goes like this. Imagine a civilization becomes advanced enough to create realistic simulations of conscious beings. They might create millions or billions of such simulations for research or entertainment or whatever. So you'd have one base reality and millions of simulated realities. If you're a conscious being, what's more likely? That you're one of the few beings in the base reality, or that you're one of the millions of beings in simulated realities? Statistically, you're probably in a simulation. Now, I'm not saying I believe this, but I'm interested in what it would mean for our experience if it was true, right? Because the thing is, like, from the inside of a simulation, everything would feel completely real. You'd have memories and relationships and sensory experiences. You'd have all of it, right? There would be no way to know you were in a simulation unless the simulators chose to reveal that fact. And here's where it connects to quantum immortality as well. Like, what if consciousness continuity is the goal of the simulation? What if the simulation is designed to keep generating experience for conscious beings, even when, from an objective standpoint, those beings should be dead? That would look a lot like quantum immortality, wouldn't it? You'd keep finding yourself in increasingly improbable circumstances, surviving things you probably shouldn't survive, and like experiencing these glitches and inconsistencies as the simulation struggles to maintain coherence in these unlikely branches, right? Again, I'm not saying this is true, but it's interesting that multiple frameworks like quantum mechanics and simulation theory and certain philosophical and spiritual traditions kind of all converge on similar descriptions of subjective experience, right? So let me talk about my sister again, because I think her memory loss is actually the most important part of my story. When the event first happened, we both experienced it. We both freaked out. We both knew something impossible had occurred. That's two independent consciousnesses observing the same impossible thing, right? That should be solid, right? If two people witness the same event, that's confirmation it really happened. That's kind of how we usually establish objective reality, like through shared observation, right? But now, like over 30 years later, only one of us remembers it. Like, what does that mean? So one possibility, it never happened, and I've developed a false memory. Maybe there was a normal near miss, and my anxiety made it feel more dramatic than it was, and over the years I've built it into this impossible event. And my sister, having no reason to hold on to the memory of a mundane near miss, simply forgot it. That's the rational, psychological explanation, and it might be true. But here's another possibility. We're living in different timelines now, even though we're physically in the same reality. Maybe in the timeline she's experiencing, that event never happened. It's been retroactively erased or never existed in her branch. But in my timeline, it did happen, and I carry that memory because I'm in a branch that split from hers at that moment. We're still sisters, we're still having conversations, we're still physically in the same space, but we're experiencing different pasts, different histories leading to the same present moment. Is that possible? I don't know. It seems like it shouldn't be. I don't know, but quantum mechanics is weird enough. I can't completely rule it out, right? So let me talk about the psychology of believing in these ideas versus not believing in them, because I've gone back and forth on this over the years. Sometimes I'm convinced something genuinely strange happened that night, that reality bent in a way it shouldn't have, and I'm living in a branch I wasn't supposed to be in. Other times I just kind of think I'm engaging in magical thinking. I don't know. I had an mundane experience in my brain, maybe seeking meaning and mystery, had transformed it into something more than it was. I'm no different from people who see faces in clouds or patterns and random noise and find significance where there is none. I don't know. Both of these perspectives feel true at different times, and I think that's okay. I think we're allowed to hold uncertainty, right? We're allowed to say, I experienced something strange and I don't know what the hell it means, and I'm okay with not knowing. I think there's a tendency in our culture to demand certainty, right? To insist that everything must either be scientifically proven or dismissed as delusion. But I think there's value in the space between those two extremes, right? There's value in saying this experience doesn't fit my current model of reality, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen just because it's inexplicable. Couldn't find the word there. There's value in taking your own experience seriously, I think, even when it contradicts consensus reality, And there's also value in maintaining skepticism, of course, in questioning your own perceptions and acknowledging that human consciousness is fallible, right? That memory is reconstructive, and we're all susceptible to cognitive biases and interpretive errors and stuff like that. Like, you can hold both of these positions simultaneously. You can say I experienced something strange and I might be wrong about what it means at the same time. What I think is actually going on, and this is my best attempt at a synthesis of all these ideas. I think consciousness is stranger and more complex than our current scientific models account for. I think the relationship between subjective experience and objective reality is probably not as straightforward as we typically assume. I think that they're genuine anomalous experiences, moments when reality seems to behave in ways that don't fit our models, near-death experiences, synchronicities, quantum phenomena, moments of radical discontinuity, right? I think these experiences are real in the sense that people genuinely have them. They're not making them up. They're not lying. Something is happening. But I also think our brains are these meaning-making machines, right? We're pattern recognition engines, and we take fragmentary, ambiguous data and we kind of weave it into these coherent narratives. And sometimes those narratives are accurate and sometimes they're not. So when you have an experience like I had, a moment that just felt impossible and violated all the rules of how reality is supposed to work, you're kind of faced with a choice about how to interpret it, right? You can fit it into a conventional framework. I had a near miss and my perception of time dilated due to adrenaline, and that made it feel more dramatic than it was. Or you can kind of fit it into an unconventional framework. Reality glitched. I shifted to a different quantum branch. I experienced something that reveals the truth about the nature of consciousness. I don't know. Both of these are interpretations and both are stories you tell yourself about what happened. And the truth is, you might never know which story is more accurate, right? So I'm going to tell you what I want you to take away from all of this. First, take your own experiences seriously. If something felt real to you, if something significant happened to you, if you had a moment that changed how you see reality, that matters. So don't let anyone talk you out of trusting your own perception. But second, hold your interpretations lightly. The experience is real. What it means is up for debate. And you're allowed to change your mind about what it means as you learn more or think more or even grow more, right? Third, be curious, ask questions. Read about quantum mechanics and consciousness studies and psychology and philosophy if you like being bored. Sit with ideas that make you uncomfortable. Be a big old geek and do that. Engage with perspectives that challenge your current understanding. And fourth, be kind to yourself about not having answers. We're all just consciousness experiencing itself through temporary human forms on a planet spinning through space, supposedly. None of us really knows what's going on. We don't. Anyone who claims complete certainty about the big questions is probably not being fully honest with themselves, and they're definitely not being fully honest with you. So let me ask you this, and I genuinely want to know, have you had an experience like this, like a moment when reality kind of seemed to glitch? When you survived something you shouldn't have, or when time felt wrong or space felt wrong, or something happened that didn't fit into your model of how things work? Have you had that feeling that something fundamental shifted? That part of you stayed in a moment and never quite came back? Have you noticed inconsistencies, like memories that don't match other people's memories, or experiences that feel more like dreams than like waking life? Have you ever had the unsettling thought, what if I actually died back then and this is something else? If you have, you're not alone. You're not crazy. I don't think so. I mean, I joke that I'm crazy, but whatever. These experiences are more common than we talk about. We just don't have good frameworks for discussing them, right? We don't have that language that kind of captures the strangeness without either over analyzing it or whatever. Like you have a mental illness or over explaining it, you definitely shifted quantum branches, whatever. Sometimes strange things happen. Sometimes we can't explain them. And sometimes the most honest response is, I don't know what that was, but it mattered to me and I'm still trying to understand it. So I wrote these 6 stories, James, Ruth, Maria, Danny, Bill, Mira, because I needed to explore what it would feel like to die and not know it, to live an entire life in a space outside of time, build relationships and families and careers in a reality that might not be the primary timeline, if there even is such a thing. I wanted to create characters who felt fully human and had rich inner lives and complex relationships and experienced all the mundane details of existence. And then I wanted to show them the truth, that all of it happened in a moment, in the space between life and death, and consciousness's refusal to stop generating experience. Because that's what haunts me about my own experiences, right? Not that I might have died that night, but that if I did, I might never know. That, from my perspective, everything continues feeling normal and real, even if from other perspectives, I'm gone. And if that's true, if consciousness really does continue in branches where survival becomes increasingly improbable, then we're all living in our own personal quantum immortality loops. All of us constantly splitting into branches where we survive, unable to perceive the branches where we don't. Which means the person you are right now, listening to this, you're in the branch where you've survived every moment up until now, every car accident that almost happened, every illness you recovered from, every decision that could have gone differently. You're in the survivor branch, and you'll always be in the survivor branch from your own perspective until what? Until consciousness itself ends, or until the last possible branch plays out? I don't know. Nobody knows. But it changes how I think about life, about consciousness, and about the nature of existence itself. So here's my final thought. And I'm going to let you go because I've just rambled on about nonsense. I mean, hopefully you're still with me. I don't know. Whether or not quantum immortality is real, whether or not my experience was what I think it was, whether or not any of this speculation has validity, none of that changes one fundamental thing. This moment right now is real. So if you're experiencing consciousness right now and hearing these words right now, if you're alive and aware and present, that matters, that counts, right? Maybe you're in an improbable quantum branch. Maybe you're in a simulation. Maybe you died 30 years ago and consciousness keeps generating experience anyway. Maybe none of that is true and reality is exactly as straightforward as it all appears, right? Either way, you're here now, you're conscious now, you're having this experience now. So what are you going to do with it? That's the question that matters, not which branch am I in or is this real, but given that I'm experiencing this, how do I want to show up? What do I want to create? How do I want to connect with others? What meaning do I want to make? Because meaning isn't something you discover. It's something you create. And you can create meaning whether you're in base reality or the millionth quantum branch or a sophisticated simulation or the dream of a dying consciousness. The experience is real. You're real. This moment is real. Everything else is speculation, and I'm totally tripped out right now. Sorry if I pulled you into that. Thank you for listening to Until They Wake. Thank you for staying with me through these 6 fictional stories and one very real exploration of the inexplicable. Thank you for being willing to sit with uncertainty with mystery. This episode in particular got kind of weird, I think, but you sat with the questions that don't have clean answers. If any of this made you think or reminded you of your own strange experiences, I want to hear about it. Really, share it. Share it. Go to the Facebook group, send me an email. All the info's in the show notes. If you've got your own stories of reality glitches and impossible moments or experiences that don't fit, tell me. I want to talk about it because this shit fascinates me. And I think, the more we normalize uncertainty and mystery and the fundamental weirdness of existence, the better chance we have of eventually actually understanding what the fuck is going on, right? Or at the very least, we'll feel less alone in not understanding. So yeah, stay curious and stay open and question everything, including this. I'm Beth Curry. Thanks for waking up with me.
There's a new way to Sweet Green. Meet Wraps. Handheld, hearty, and made for life on the move. With bold, chef-crafted flavors, fresh ingredients, and over 40 grams of protein, they're built to satisfy without slowing you down. Try Wraps today in the app or at order.sweetgreen.com. Available at all participating locations.